Are you able to see my screen? Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our last but not least session today at STCAI conference. So today we have a panel discussion. The topic is getting started with AI startups, and we have three distinguished guests with us, and it's moderated by Dr. Sourav. So I think I'll just hand off to Dr. Sourav to do the introduction, and yeah, I think I hand over to Dr. Sourav. Thank you.
Thank you, Harris. Welcome, everyone. A very good afternoon to everyone who is joining us for this session. STCAI 2021. I believe you have enjoyed the last 2 days, yesterday and today, of the conference. And you have also had another panel discussion talking about AI for social impact and social good yesterday. Today, we are going to tackle a completely different issue, or may not be so completely different. It's also interlinked to some extent. We are going to talk about startups in AI. And we are going to talk about how to start with startups in this industry, right? So with me today, I am really fortunate to have three distinguished guests. We have Mr. Sean Shah. He is, to start with, an NTU alumnus, computer science, computer engineering, 2005. And then he went on to found a number of startups. And now currently he is Next Products and Platform NCA's lead product investigator with the Singtel Group. We also have with us Dr. Shafiq Joty. Shafiq has been with the School of Computer Science and Engineering, NTU, as an assistant professor for a few years now. And he is also a senior manager at Salesforce AI Research, known as this Einstein Group. And we have with us Mr. Santosh Katti, who is an alumnus of two of the best institutes in India, and then has been here in Singapore, I heard, for 20 years and over. He is the CEO and founder of Graphene Services, working in the area of AI towards healthcare, towards products in startups. And in recent times, this has been awarded as one of the top 60 startups in the world by Swiss-based Seedster World in case of best healthcare in AI applications. My name is Sourav. I'll be the moderator for this panel. What I'll do is I'll be on your side. I understand our audience is mostly students. I do teach a very basic course in data science and AI, and then I see our students go up and create ideas and create startups based on those ideas. It's always very fascinating for me. So what we'll do is we'll try to learn from these experts about how to go ahead and start your startup journey. Maybe I start with a very basic question to our panel. Sean, if we may start with you. What's your passion in AI, and talk a little bit about your work that you do in this space?
Oh, cool. Yeah, hi everyone, Sean here. Yeah, my passion for this type of artificial intelligence actually started on the day I was in NTU. Yeah, interestingly, when I took my last year, I actually intentionally took all the AI related courses for artificial intelligence to neural network and expert system distributed database design. Yeah, so ever since then, I founded like companies that actually involve in video analytics and also in data analytics. Back then, I would say that the technology stack is not as complete as today. Yeah, you guys are a lot fortunate than what we have last time. Yeah, we didn't have a proper AI framework or machine learning framework back then. Yeah. So this nowadays, ever since I joined the NCS, my focus is actually on robotics. Yeah, not the type of virtual robots like chatbot, but more really on the physical robots where if you have seen the YouTube, is something like the one like Boston Dynamic is doing, robotic dogs, service robots. Yeah, which actually from the top down, right, there's plenty of video analytics, those type of path optimization algorithms all have to be, you need to know all this whole stack in order to get this robot working. Yeah, it's a very exciting piece of work that I'm working in NCS. Yeah, so I'm pretty much enjoying it now.
Pretty cool. And you have also been involved with a lot of startups. So that's also been a part of the journey, right?
Yeah, so all the startups that I found from this type of software as service and to video analytics, yeah, has been my focus for the last 10 years plus. Yeah, and my focus is more into business application, the B2B business more than the B2C.
Understood. So talking about the business applications, not really robotics, but Mr. Santosh, if I may come to you, how about the application of analytics that you have seen in various types of industries? Tell us a little bit about the work that you are passionate about, that you do.
Sure, thank you, Sourav, and pleasure to be here. It's my privilege. It's always a duty and an honor to share with bright students like this. So thank you for inviting me here. My journey actually didn't start with AI. It started with a basic premise that, look, you need to disrupt. There's enough in technology to disrupt the world and leave a lasting legacy for impacting humanity. And AI was kind of something we stumbled on as the most effective way of making that impact. So I'll answer your question in two parts. So one is what are we doing, but broadly, where are we seeing the impact of analytics with AI? Our journey has been primarily focused on text analytics and image analytics, and we've really looked at the applied uses of that. So we don't approach it so much as whether it's text or image, those are capabilities, but really we start with where are there opportunities in the market, and I'll give you a couple of opportunities we worked on. I think you also mentioned the previous section on social impact. So one of the first areas we worked on is diabetic retinopathy. What that means is around 25% of diabetics go blind. They develop something called diabetic retinopathy, and if it is picked up, early enough, then there is a chance to slow it down and make sure that people don't lose their eyesight. So the only way it can be done today is if you can go to the doctor and the doctor can take your, there's a specific camera called a fundus camera in which they take your image and then they analyze it. And we wanted to make sure that this can be done through technology so that even GP can do it. So we developed a technology where the AI could predict that this person could be developing eye complication due to diabetes, and that's how we piloted this in rural India, and we had around 10,000 patients and saved around 1,000 patients from blindness, right? So that's one application that we have, and that thing is still running, and it's actually recognized. That's the one that's won us awards, actually. The other is market research. Now, as you know, in market research, you all done market research in your courses, and it starts with a questionnaire and it starts with an answer, and there's a bias both ways. You're biased on what question you're asking, and there are many experiments, and I'm sure you've all read it in your universities, where there is a bias to the way that people answer when they're asked a question. So what we said is, how can we disrupt this? How can we develop an unbiased way of doing market research? So what we do is we look for social conversations and turn those social conversations. So for example, if your question is, what are the biggest aspirations of students graduating in this cohort from NTU and in AI, we go and look at all the people who are talking about it, and the AI automatically converts the text into, look, here are the big areas that they're talking about. They're talking about, impact. They're talking about career progression. They're talking about challenges. They're talking about money, and then all the stuff, right? So that's just to give you a sense on how the impact can go. But broadly, to answer the other part on how it's being applied, I think I see a lot of it being applied where there may be three areas, right? Which is, one is where it can AI can bring in a way to do things faster, a way to do things cheaper, or a way to do it better than humans in terms of precision. And a lot of the cost has been linked to manufacturing. You see a lot of AI linked to manufacturing. You see a lot of AI linked to security systems, whether it is cybercrime, terrorism, all of that, where it does faster and better than human beings, for example. So almost any industry is now proliferated with where people are asking, how can we use AI to do things either faster, cheaper, or better than humans? And that's how I see this whole analytics journey playing out in that space.
Right. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Santosh. I think that's a quite wide description of all the areas in which the students may see AI impacting and also find ideas to start up. Let us come to Shafiq. This is something that I partially understand because Shafiq wears two hats now, one in the industry and one in academia. So Sean talked to us about the third and fourth year courses. Shafiq teaches courses like that, as well as Santosh talked about all the industry aspects. Shafiq works in that in Salesforce. How is it wearing the two hats? How do you balance the two?
Yeah, so thanks again, Sourav, for inviting me here, and it's quite exciting to be here. And also talk to the students regarding my journey. So I have been in Singapore for about, I just completed my fourth year now, like this August, yeah. So I'll be completing my fourth year this August, yeah. So, being in academy is very exciting in the sense that you get to teach the incredible, talented students. And over the years, I have been quite fortunate to sort of work with the students that I think that they can go anywhere. That our local talents are superb in that sense. So I have been always advocating for that. Let's not think about Silicon Valley for the moment. Let's think about our local talents. So that is one thing that I've been kind of advocating in when I am in Singapore. But coming back to your question that like how do I manage these two? So in the sense that both are quite beneficial for me. From the company perspective, it gives me access to larger scale compute and also very highly skilled engineers and AI researchers who are already ready to implement the ideas. On the other hand, at the university, you get to teach and train these engineers, right? So you have kind of the full cycle now. So you are teaching in one hand to make these engineers, and then you are also working there who are almost ready. So so from that side, I would say that being in kind of or having these two hats, they can kind of inform each other. So when I am, let's say, I'm here in Singapore, and my colleagues are mostly from Palo Alto, from Silicon Valley, so they can inform me what is the cutting edge research and what is the most up-to-date paper addressing those things. And that kind of knowledge sharing helps also my students, because then when I talk to my students, I can share this knowledge to my students. And then on the other side, let's say what I can bring from academia to the company is the societal aspect, right? So which is perhaps they are not that serious about, right? So I can say that, yeah, we need to follow this ethical aspects when you are going about launching a product and so on. So over the years, we could sort of launch several projects, several kind of products. For example, personally, I have been involved in a translation, like the machine translation product, where we sort of translated the help documents that comes with different products into 18 different languages, and that is now in our product, and that got eventually kind of the best patent award it's inside Salesforce now. So that was a quite successful story. And also currently we are working with our product teams on many different aspects like AI ops, then also like NER, which is something that I have been working on also at NTU with my students. So yeah, it's not two distinct things, I would say. It's very kind of integrated. It's basically, but again, the main challenge here is to separate these two IP. So it's that is the main challenge. So what I do personally is that whatever I do at NTU, it stays here, and whatever I do at Salesforce, it stays there. So I try to kind of distinguish two things, and I kind of spend 3 days at NTU. I don't take any meeting from Salesforce on those 3 days. Similar thing, when I am the other 2 days at Salesforce, I don't take any meeting from NTU. So it's a very clear-cut separation for me. Yeah. So this is how I'm trying to manage. But yeah, it's sometimes difficult in terms of the IP, but in terms of the research and the benefits, is very win-win situation for me.
Right. Thanks a lot, Shafiq. I mean, I understand. So research definitely would translate into practicals, and then vice versa. You'll get problems from the practical side.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
let's go in and zoom into the other side of the story, or rather the main question the students might have, which is how does it go in the business world? So Sean, as per your profile, maybe I start with you first. You have been a chief marketing officer, CTO, CEO, so all kinds of hats. How does one go into the business side of the story as a student?
Well, I guess when you see that I hold all these CXO title, right, it probably means that as a founder of a startup, you pretty much have to wear all the hats at the start. Yeah. So, well, unfortunately, I'll probably say that the fun thing about startup is that you get to name yourself anything you want. Yeah. Most importantly is that what are you selling to the market lah. I think that's the challenges that we as a startup we have. I think in the terms of the business world, right? When it comes to you trying to do the startup, yeah, it is important to know what problem you are solving. Yeah, and then whether you have the right, what we call the solution fit to the market problem. Yeah. One of the things that we always face as a challenge as a young startup is whether you always think that your solution is the best fit for the problem. Yeah, and unfortunately, I would say that maybe 90% of those solutions fails to address the problem correctly. Yeah, you have to be ready to pivot as fast as possible. And as a young students that you guys, I would say that it is important to fail fast, try fast and fail very fast. The fastest you fail actually means that you have a higher chance to succeed. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's a really interesting thought for the students for sure. So maybe anyone in the panel. I got a question from the audience, Ruben. He asked, what are the important points to note before presenting even a startup idea pitch to VCs? So what would you say your take is on that? Maybe Santosh, may I ask you?
Sure. So I have done a round of pitches to VCs, right? And remember that what the VCs are looking at is the VCs own somebody else's money, and the mindset for the VCs is usually what the VCs do. Their mindset is, look, let me pick 10 ideas, and out of those 10 ideas, I just need one of them to be a blockbuster, right? So the VCs are not interested in a very safe idea. They're looking for, look, I know that 9 of them are going to fail, but the one idea that works needs to make up for the 9. So you need to understand that's the mindset of the VC. So if you're approaching a VC, you need to have a big hairy idea. You need to have a big hairy story to say that you're really going to change the world. If you're going to go there and say, you know what, there's a small idea, I'm going to get a share in it. They know that you can make money in it, but their strategy, the thing they'll be thinking is this one idea going to make up for the other 9 that's likely to fail, right? That's the question that you need to answer. And as you know, if you need to do that, it's what I told you, right? The first thing to start with is convince them to say that, look, there is an arbitrage here, that somebody would be willing to pay money for the arbitrage of either doing some things cheaper, faster, better than what it's currently done, and that there is a large enough market for it, right? And then I would say you may have heard this, but there's research that says 90% of all human decisions are made emotionally, not rationally, right? The other thing that they're looking for is how passionate are you about this? Have you got skin in the game? Are you turning up there with passion? And I'll give you an example, right? In the early days, I went to a very, very big established VC, and he turned around and said, you know what? I like your idea, but I actually want you more than I want your idea. So I'll buy you out for a small amount. I'll give you around $1 million is what he said. But actually, I'm not interested. I'm giving you $1 million so you can pay out everybody else. Come and join me because I have this other company where I like your profile. And I didn't join him. I'm still here. So I actually say, no, I believe in my idea. I believe that this can make a significant impact. And even today, he writes to me to ask me how I'm doing, right? So you need to bring in that passion. And that's where I would leave it. Look, there are very many ways to achieve this, right? I mean, if you look at some of our recent disruptions, Airbnb is one. Who would have thought of it? Going and picking apartments and saying, hey, I will turn it around and do something like this. Who would have thought of it? Or Grab, right? Or what started as Uber. Who would have thought of it? Somebody sat there and said, I'm going to do something. And then some VC looked at it and said, you know what? There will actually be private car owners who let people sit in their cabs and earn money for it. And so you see, somebody had the passion, somebody pitched a story, somebody said, look, this is how big it is, and somebody else in the VC community imagined to say, if this goes big, look, I'll make it, right? So that's what it is. It's about how big and hairy is your idea, how logically can you prove that you have a technology that can pull it off, and finally, it's the passion. And I would rate the third one the most important. You may have the best idea in the world. If there are two people pitching, one has more passion and faith in their idea and more hunger, that second person will probably get it.
Right.
Just to add to that, one thing is,
Yes.
I think is more important. I mean, it's probably after the pitching is that, so doing the way in the best possible way. I mean, there could be concurrent ideas, right? Let's say you have Uber and Grab. But one could succeed, one could not, or maybe, I mean, the same idea was there, but I think the main thing here is because now in today's world, I think the customers, they have more choices, and I mean, it's probably empowered than ever before, right? With the social media and everything. So you need to make sure that whatever you are developing, you serve your customer the best way. Comparing with the other alternatives in the market, even though the idea may not be completely novel, so that is probably another aspect to that.
Right. Maybe I pivot on that, what you said, what Santosh mentioned about the passion and you pitching this idea. Shafiq said you have to go on. So what do you think? Should a student, when they're the most passionate about the idea, maybe during their bachelor's, third and fourth year, that's the time when they're really seeing the world, do they jump into a startup, or do they wait and master the technical skills by going through a master's program? What's your suggestion? What would you do, or what did you do? Sean, Shafiq, Santosh?
Nice one. Maybe I can start that one.
Yeah.
I'm very sure that you don't need an MBA to do a startup. Yeah, it only costs you maybe about $200 to $300 to start a startup, register a company, and then write a business plan, and you're there. Yeah, I think that's the practical answer. But if you sorry, my kids. Sorry, my kids for a while.
No problem.
Yeah, go outside. Sorry.
They're also interested in a startup idea, so that's fine. It's good that they go ahead, sure.
Yeah. So sorry, I need to go for a while. Sorry.
No problem. Okay, maybe we transfer the call to maybe the same topic, Shafiq. So from an academic point of view, what would you say when you hire someone for your research team, you're looking for masters or PhDs? Would you say somebody start right at undergraduate, or maybe go for a master's or a PhD?
So I mean, our situation is slightly different because we are in a research lab, right? So there, the expectation is that you have a PhD. So we even don't interview applicants with a master's even. So because we think that we need a formal education in writing, let's say, papers, in writing maybe ideas, right? So, or even presenting ideas. So that is something different when you are asking about, let's say, whether it is the right time to go to work for company versus to go for like the startups. But I mean, to come back to your original question, like the startups, I would say that you need to know your craft, because the thing is, I mean, I was listening to Elon Musk the other day, and he was saying that, I think the main reason that he has been quite successful is because that he knows what he's doing. right? And otherwise, I think you have to rely on other people, and that is probably not a very good option. Even to hire the main seed of people around you, you need to know that stuff, right? So I think that is probably more important before you jump into committing yourself for a startup, that you know what you're trying to do. Yeah.
And that's a great point, Shafiq. If I were to build on it, my advice to all of you is, I know now that there are multiple internships that all of you can go through. And the first thing you should do is go through an internship in a startup to know if it's your cup of tea, right? And it is not everybody's cup of tea. One is, for example, we are a fairly successful startup. I work 7 days a week, and I work pretty late hours. So whether they like it or not, if my staff is getting stuff from me, I'm not asking them to work, but they end up working. Almost everybody in my company ends up working some weekends or the other. And it's not everybody's cup of tea, right? There is no structure to this. There is no formal training to this. You're put into the deep end and you need to learn. The other is, so I think the first thing I would advise all of you is get an internship as soon as possible to see if you like it. Okay, if you like it. So I'll give you my example. When I joined P&G back in 2000, they put me on a startup idea. I actually ran my own startup within P&G for a year. And then they put me onto the traditional P&G business. And I spent 10 years. And not 1 year was as fun as my first year. I worked harder on that first year than I ever did in the next 10 years. I had more structure, etc. So you if you get into that, you have a primal calling. It's like choosing a girlfriend or a boyfriend, right? I mean, sometimes you just find that thing and then you want to get back with that. It's like that. And there's no way. I mean, like Shafiq said, there's no way for you to figure it out till you get into the cauldron and see, do you like the heat or you hate the heat? And that's what it is. And I totally agree. I think Sean, Shafiq have all made the same point. That most of the best companies have all had people who have dropped out of college, not necessarily even completed college, right? So I know every one of you here is from an Ivy League school, highly talented. You've come through the rigor. You're all highly talented. I think the guidance is go finish your whatever you're doing and start off. If you have the passion, start off. And there are always ways that you can go and learn about financial planning, learn about marketing strategy as part-time courses while you pick it up. And then, of course, after a few years of doing a startup, you can always go back, suppose, and you know that, right? You need to be mentally prepared. Only 1 in 10 startups succeed, which means that you'll probably need to take 10 attempts at a startup before you succeed. So you'll be there. So you can take a few attempts, go do a postgrad after that, come back, do it. Various ways to approach it.
Right. And those are really good points. Sean, do you want to finish off with your thoughts on that? No problem.
Yeah, so it's a good sharing, Santosh and Sharu. So yeah, when I run so many startups and when I look back to my uni life, some of the things that I do regret is not running a business during my uni time. Yeah, to be honest. And I was actually a hall person in NTU, joining hall activities. And when I start to look back, right, I would say to myself that, I should have spent my time trying to run a small startup in uni, where you have all the resources to let you try and let you fail. Yeah, and to be honest, if you need to learn financial, take one of the courses, right? Your election, right? You could do it, right? So there's nothing stopping you, and the professors are all great to share with you anything you want to learn. And in fact, I believe most of the professors also have a startup experience, actually. Yeah, to share with you. This is the best place to start. And I will actually urge that anybody who has any idea, just go and try it out and learn the pitching. But actually, when I was looking through the discussion, is that we spoke about internship. I think internship is also a very important way for you to discover when you are unsure whether this is the right path for you. Yeah, the very fact that if you even think that you're not sure whether startup is for you, I think it's probably not for you. Yeah. The fact is that if you are passionate about something, you will just do it. And to really do something and make it work, you really need a lot of persistence And you probably can't wait for people to tell you that this is the right time. You probably say that I must do it. That has to be the attitude you go for. Yeah. But going intern would be a good way to say that I want to do it, but before I do it, I want to pick out some skills. And that's where you do the internship to pick out the skills and then execute your plan. Yeah. So it's very important to know why you do the intern. Is it because you're not sure you want to do a startup, or because you want to acquire some skill to do it?
Yeah, great point, Sean. And the one thing I would add to what Sean said is, if you go end up in an internship, make sure you directly talk to the founder and ask the founder if you're cut out for the startup world. Because the worst thing you can do is go there and not really get feedback from the founder who's seen it all to say if you're cut out for that world or not. And you'll get a reality check there, right? So always keep it. If there's one thing that you keep in mind, I don't care what else you do in that internship, make sure you talk to the founder, make sure they know what you're doing, and ask them at the end to say, hey, will I cut it or not?
Lovely. Lovely. So getting it straight from the horse's mouth. Absolutely. That's a great suggestion. Santosh, Sean, Shafiq, thanks a lot. Maybe we take a question by somebody who raised their hand. Sajna, do you have a question?
Yes. Thank you so much. Like everyone's insights are like very different and like very helpful. So like hearing from experience, I'm really glad to be here. I have a question. Like, how is it different to start an AI based startup and like another startup? Like, what's the differences? What do we need to keep in mind?
I mean, I can possibly start with, just as a caution, when you are starting with AI based, because there is a lot of hype going on with AI. If you are listening to OpenAI, they are probably claiming something insane that, yeah, they're probably replacing programmers, like, with that very large language model that they train, or let's say GPT-3. Probably will replace humans, right? So if you read the paper, you feel like, or even their blogs, they have now even stopped publishing papers in a formal venue. They just write their findings in a blog. Now it can be quite scary when you are reading, or probably just listening or just reading the blog. But you need to really know the limits of this technology, and you don't overcome it yourself that without knowing something more concretely, I would say. Because from outside you could see that, yeah, there is a huge potential of AI, and in certain fields this is very possible that this can take you to the product. But in some cases, for example, let's say reasoning, the current AI models, they cannot do much of reasoning. They can just memorize, or they can just possibly copy, or they can just possibly just map the input to the output, right? There's not much of reasoning going on when you are asking the model to answer a question that requires some kind of logical, or maybe some kind of numerical reasoning. So there the models fail. Now, if you are going for a startup or a product that requires this kind of reasoning, then you are not going, at least with the current technology, you cannot be successful, right? So you need to be actually know like where the current technology is when it comes to the AI, because there's a lot of hype. So you need to know the main, I would say the main truth behind this technology, like how far you can go with these technologies.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Shafiq. I think the way you called it out is a great point. And by the way, that's a great question. I think I'll frame it to say what you're looking at is, since all of you here are from the computer science background, you're asking what's the difference between starting another technology startup versus an AI startup, is how I will read the question. And I'll add a story to what Shafiq was talking about. Okay, we've all seen Iron Man. We've all seen Jarvis. I've actually had a client who said, you do AI, I wanted to do that. I am not kidding you. He said, I want to ask it a question and it should answer me intelligently. And I said, look, if you have $100 million, I'll build it for you, right? So I think people think AI is what they see in the movies. So and this is not because there are more AI in the movies than the reality, right? So one of the things about an AI startup is setting expectations with your client on what it can do and what it cannot, right? There is AI being applied in many places, for example, in the medical field. But there is a reason why AI is not replacing a doctor. right? You can't trust an AI enough today to say that, look, it can take a better judgment than a doctor can, right? And so that's one. The second is there is a big gap in AI between what happens in the lab and what happens on the ground. That's the other challenge. What I mean by that is the same area I was talking about, right? If you look at diabetic retinopathy with the eye, Google 3 years ago came out with a video to show that in clinical research, their AI was giving a 99% accuracy of even telling the level of complication of the eye problem due to diabetes, right? But when they actually went to field and implemented it, not in the lab conditions, it only gave a 65% accuracy because they had taken very pristine images. But that camera does a 3D imaging, and if the person who's taking the image is not trained well enough, it is giving a 65% accuracy. So the other issue with AI is what it does in the lab and what it translates into real world situations usually has a gap. So it's something that you need to be, that's why you need to look at it. I think the third one is finding a viable financial model in AI is much more challenging than it is in the normal world. Today, I know for a fact that IBM has gone and they've got something called Deep Blue. They've gone around to countries like Japan where they've taken a minimum of $500,000 per client, done a lot of projects, all of them have failed. So not only has IBM failed and they don't know how to set up a model, right? And all these clients are now burnt and saying, I'm not going to touch AI again because, I've lost my face with my bosses by going and spending $500,000 or something that gave me nothing. So finding a financially viable model is less proven in the AI space. The final thing, which is not a challenge, but something which is a reality you need to all know, is AI is one of the fields where 60% of the knowledge is still in the academia. You will not be able to succeed in AI without collaborating with the academia. It's a given, right? For example, we collaborate with Professor Eric Cambria from NTU. He's one of our collaborators. So also with some other profs around the world. And finding the right talent. So we recently did a global search for some of the talent. And in Asia, there are only 12 people who have the experience we're looking for. So you don't have the experience in the industry. You will look for academia, you will look for people where they will learn on the job, and that's the challenge. So those are some of the things that you should keep in mind on how this is going to be very different from normal tech startups where you don't come across any of these challenges.
Right. Thanks a lot, Santosh and Shafiq. Sean, maybe I go towards you for adding on towards Sajna's. So in terms of AI, so you are in a very different space, right? You are not doing so much of analytics per se. You are way more into robotics. How do you sell such an idea? How does one go into creating an idea in that space?
Okay, so the question about this and all the other questions is in a way related. Okay, when you want to start an AI startup or any startup, the question is not whether it is AI or not. It is what problem are you trying to solve? Yeah, and whether you believe that your solution, believe is probably not the right word to choose. It's whether you have researched enough to make sure that your solution is proven to be the best way to solve that problem. Yeah. So every business goes that way. Yeah. And if you can't answer that question about simple problem solution fit and then a product market fit, you're probably not the right thing to do. As for like AI startup versus normal startup, right? There's a joke sometimes between the entrepreneurs is that if you want to raise money, just put AI in front. Yeah. Okay. Otherwise, right, there's really no difference between any startup, whether it's AI or not. It's what problem you're solving, whether you're doing the right solution to solve it. Yeah. And of course, there's another time when we use the word AI is when we are doing B2B business. Yeah. To be fair, right, if you tell a consumer, right, this is AI, do they really care? They don't care, right? Yeah. It's just question is whether you can solve my problem today, right now. Yeah. But B2B, probably when you started the idea of AI, they will start saying, oh, okay, what do you have? And they will give you the time and that the luxury of time to actually understand what you're talking about. Yeah. So it depends what you're working on. Yeah. So when we start on this robotics, right, we also have to find what is the type of problem space we have to do it. And in the context of what NCS, a big company like us, can do, or probably like what IBM can do versus what a young startup that a student fund can do, this is where we draw the line of the horizon. Yeah, the fact is that if you're going to run a startup at your experience at your time, you have to think about what's your runway. Yeah, and to prove your point, yeah, you have probably very little experience. You may be very technically strong, but how much runway can you burn in order to prove that you have find a right product market fit? Yeah, and there's probably a lot of challenge there. Yeah. So when we do it in enterprise environment, it's a bit different, right? We have a long horizon, and we look at a problem that's probably in a very big scale and probably in a very long-term scale. We can tackle that because we probably know that this is a game plan, a long-term game plan that we strategically wants to do. Yeah, but a young startup probably that's with from a university, right? You have to really be focused on solving the problem that is happening today. If you try to solve a problem that's probably going to coming into the market like 5 years later, that's probably not the type of game you can afford to play, unless you are probably unless someone in the world proves that you are a genius in this and they are ready to put the money on you. Yeah, but what's the chance, right? Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Makes sense.
I would,
Shafiq, sorry.
I'd possibly disagree a bit because I mean, I think the big companies here actually they're investing 25 years from now, right? You take DeepMind, perhaps they are not favored by Google at this point, but the kind of thing that they're doing, they're investing for 20 years from now. Same as Salesforce. What we are doing, we have project like AI economics, where we're trying to model, let's say, how the economic would work with a reinforcement learning kind of framework. So again,
that's for the enterprise, right? So you have a long horizon to prove the problem, so you can do it. But if you think about the students trying to form their own startups, that's probably something you will not want to touch.
I agree. Yes.
Yeah, correct.
Makes sense. So sorry. So when you're talking about, say, going B2B or maybe B2C is slightly harder in terms of Sean mentioned, right? So B2B may be easier. So there's a question that came in just now, and it probably fits in. How do you do market research for an AI startup? How do you convince the market to provide you with the correct inputs? And do you think that they may not give you the correct inputs because you're encroaching upon their businesses?
It's true. It's not so easy for. Actually, it also depends on which country you are in. It's also a very political and situation. If you're in the world, China, maybe not now. Maybe if you are back in China a few years back, right? Collection of data and trying to analyze it can be quite easy for you to achieve. But in places where there's stronger regulation about data privacy, collecting data is actually a pain. Yeah, that's why people like Grab, probably Salesforce, they have a lot of data that they could mine and analyze, and that gives them the advantage. And that advantage is also some of the reason why some of this company continues to get investments into their businesses. Yeah. Well, again, as I said, the good thing about the young students starting the startup at this time, right, is that you may have access to such data in an academic point of view. Yeah, and that's the best time, right? You can actually try to work on leverage on these opportunities, right, to learn. Once you probably get into the private sector, I mean, into the real world, I personally find it very hard to collect data, especially in countries with strong data data protection law. Yeah.
Right. So, Santosh, what's your take? You work a lot with other companies in the sales space.
Sure. So if I understand the question right, Sourav, what you're saying is if a student wants to do a startup, how do they validate if the idea has potential?
Exactly.
Right?
So how do you do the market research and get a good validation?
So we take a slightly different view on this. And I think the panelists have also touched upon it, right? So one of it is, for example, if Uber has worked in the US, how can you replicate an idea that is working in some other part of the world? And nobody is doing it here, or very few people. That's how Grab started, right? Or that's how, for example, Shopee started, Lazada started. They copied Amazon, right? So one way is to say that, look, there's a proven player and I can do that better. And you may have heard of Flipkart India, which has been a roaring success. They basically started an Amazon in India before Amazon entered India, and then they really made it big. So that's one way, right? And I know some of the panelists already talked about it. So it's taking what somebody is doing, and by the way, the investor, that's also very easy to find funding. If something has worked in the US, and if we can prove that it's working in the US, most people will fund it here. So that's one way to look at it. The other is, remember, anybody who's read Steve Jobs remembers, right? He never believed in market research because he said your consumers will never tell you what they need. Only you know what they need. They only know what they want. So if you believe that you have figured out something, the best way to do this is prototype it, right? And the best way to prototype it is find one client who wants to pay for it, and then do it, right? So if even one client wants to pay for it, it means there is some leg for it, right? So that's how we are a B2B startup. So that's how we do everything. We usually take something, we never do it for free. That's the rule. Okay, there is this thing going around that you can do it for free. Of course, if you do it for free, everybody will pick it up, right? What have they got to lose? But you should never do it for free. Pick up a prototype and say, I will do it for you. I will do it at cost or whatever. Let it be your investment, but make sure they pay for it. The moment they pay for it, there is some value. Nobody, whether they're an individual or a business, will never pay you for something unless they see value in it. That's your best way of checking it, right? But if you're doing a B2C, the best way to do it is, again, prototype it, do it for 3-4 months, and put. I'm telling you this because we also did this. Around 10 years ago, I did a B2C startup, right? And it was a unique idea. It was a different way of doing what's eBay, but it was a take on eBay, but a completely different way of doing it. We did it for 6 months. We invested our money. It was ahead of the track that we were getting, right? So that's the first thing. Can you put on a glide path and say that you're ahead of the glide path? If you are, then you have belief that the idea is going to work. The other thing in any B2C that you should keep in mind is you will not be able to pull off a B2C idea by bootstrapping it. You need investment, right? And in that case, what happened is that it was a B2C idea where after 6 months, we started going to investors, and the investors weren't ready to put money into it. So we pulled the plug, right? Because that's the other reality you need to face. If you're in a B2C idea, if it's met your track for 6 months and in the next 6 months nobody wants to put money for it, it doesn't matter, because whether you don't have time to think about, look, is your pitch not good? Is your business model not good? And in our case, what we figured is we were too early, right? We were too early because if we had done it 2 years later, then the e-commerce boom in India was happening and we would have been on it, and we did something where it was too early. But you don't have the time to intellectualize, right? The best favor you can do yourself is set yourself very objective boundaries. Don't get emotionally attached to it. You're meant to fail. And I think somebody said it. I think Sean said it. You have to fail fast to keep moving to the next level. That's kind of how you should look at it.
Right. Perfect. Thanks a lot, Santosh, Sean, Shafiq, for this. Maybe we turn the side a little bit on the reverse side of the story. So tech, AI, and preparation is one side of it. We had a question, and I'll refactor the question for maybe Sean to start with. When you look at building a startup, you also have to consider the human resources that you have, the team that you're building. How do you prioritize the team based on competence in this field, based on passion, based on trust? How would you go for it?
Oh, wow, that's a tough question. Yeah, I think I have started a few business with different type of people, like based on trust, based on technical and things. There's no formula to that. Yeah, there's no formula to that. And I think for every different type of startup, you need to focus at different skill set at different phases. Yeah. If I were to say that, let's say the first day of the startup, right, you probably wants to make sure that you need to at least minimally trust the guy that you're working with, and that you have complementary skill set. If you're a marketing and business person, you probably want someone to look after the technical aspect. Yeah, think of it like a basketball game or soccer ball game, right? Everybody has an area of place to duties in the role, and you can't run full court, right? You can't run the whole game, right? Yeah. It's like, example, right? I have very different different roles from CTO to CMO, but in my career, I never hold both at the same time. Yeah, I will make sure that I have another teammate that will be able to cover my other role while I focus on one. Yeah. So
Right.
and if you go to the later stage of your business, then you will probably, the whole dynamic will change. You will start to look for people maybe more into the technical side, domain knowledge as you start. Yeah. So the thing change as you go along. Yeah, there's no right and wrong formula to it. Yeah. So
Right.
sometimes
Thanks.
you really have to just think about what you really need at a point when you run the business. Let's say the first 100 days, what do you really need? The first 1 year, what do you really need? Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thanks a lot, Sean, for sharing that. Shafiq, how does it work? You're in a research lab. It must be exactly different.
I mean, for me, it's a slightly different experience because I'm not I did not launch any business or anything, or even a startup. But whenever I'm kind of interviewing, let's say a candidate or a potential employee, I want to make sure that this is the most capable person that I could think of being a colleague, because we need to speak the same language. We need to speak the same kind of jargon and everything, right? So that is very important for me. I'm very particular about the selection, and usually I don't commit if I'm not 100% sure about a particular student or a particular employee. I rather pass a lot and only pick maybe 1 out of 100. So that is my strategy, that I only want to get the people that I'm very comfortable with to work for, even though that can maybe jeopardize some of my project plans because of, let's say, I'm not being able to hire EOM. But I don't want to sort of waste time on someone who is not capable to do the things. That is a waste of time for everyone, and that kind of sets a sub-standard for the whole group. So that has been my strategy so far. I mean, in NTU and as well as in Salesforce. I mean, whenever I have a control, I try to maintain that. Yeah.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So research lab would be obviously a different consideration. Santosh, if I may come to you. So Graphene Services, from the very beginning till now, how do you choose people at that point? How do you choose people now?
Look, one of the things that you need to keep in mind is when you do a startup, and any human, right, comes into a new job, any new assignment with rose-tinted glasses. It's a question of how many months it takes before the craziness hits them and they realize that, this is not for the faint-hearted, right? And so what I look for is really, look, why are these guys really coming and joining us, right? And if they're coming in for reasons where I feel that they will not be able to take the downsides of the journey, then that's where I say, look, this is not the right fit, because they will come in, they will figure out that this is a long play, right? I mean, that's one. The second is I look for, do they really believe in the vision, and I make the point to make sure I tell them what are we doing and why are we doing this. For example, we know that we're trying to make an impact, right? And if they don't share a passion for also making an impact on humanity, then it'll never work, right? Because the values are not aligned. They're looking after something else. They may not be selfish, they may be looking at something else, but maybe making an impact, changing humanity is not the thing. And they'll come there and say, why am I going through all of this nonsense when I don't believe in the values of what you're going through? So that's very important. I think the third thing is, this is something that we actually picked up from Singapore Airlines, and I don't know if you're aware of it. So what SQ does is, they don't have a structured format. They just take their cabin crew and put them there and say, can you do the first level of interview, and it's just whether you'll get along with that person. And we do the same. We let our current people go and interview a person to say, will they get along? That's it. There's no structure, there's nothing. Because you want people who feel that they've chosen the person and they've already filtered that they get along with it. It's going to be a small team. They are going to work very, very closely across silos. You're going to have each other's back. And you don't want to be the one who's making the decision, because honestly, all my staff are 10 years younger than I am. They come from a different generation. They have a different outlook, and they all grew up in Singapore. I grew up in India and came here. So cultures are not the same. And I can't second guess what kind of people they get along with. So I always make sure that there is a round where they go and say, the only question I ask them is, will you work with this person? And sometimes they come back and say no. And then we just don't ask why, right? And we just let it be. So those are some of the things we do.
That's great. Thanks a lot. That gives a very well-rounded perspective of how you go for a team. Sajna, you have your hand raised once again.
Yes.
Quick question, yes, please.
Okay, I have a question. So when you have a problem and you see a problem and a solution you have, so what do you do next? Like, do you actually first go and like see whether your potential customers have that problem? Like, do you validate, like, do you do customer validations, or do you actually go and like do like whether there is like the solution you think is possible, like whether you can come up with an accurate AI based solution?
Okay, so maybe which one comes first? Validation of your problem or attempting the solution? Who would take that? Feel free, please.
I can't speak for the rest, but I'll come up with a sales pitch deck. That's all. Yeah.
I would do the same. I would do what Sean said, Sajna, which is, and the reason you would do that is, when you go and pitch it, you will find that there are 10 other people who already realize there's a problem and trying to solve it, right? What you will find is that you shouldn't get disheartened by that. What you will need to figure out is, where is the gap? So you think you have a problem, but to refine it to where is the exact problem you need to crack takes a little more time. I'll give you an example, right? We recently figured that there is a certain problem in HR, okay, where we can use our AI. So I went to some of my old contacts in P&G or in HR, and I pitched the problem to them. And they turned around and said, we don't do this, nobody is doing this for us. But the reason that we are not interested is because for the kind of company we are, we don't care about what you're pitching. But, so I probed, right? And said, okay, but where else? And then they gave me a different answer, right? So I thought there was a problem. There is a problem that we can solve, but not the way we were thinking about it. Because that the client didn't want, but there was something else the client said, hey, but if you do this, I will take it, right? So to Sean's point, start with the pitch.
Right, makes sense. Good. Sajna, does that answer your question?
Yes, just like a continuation of the question.
Sure.
So, now you get like there's another problem and now you got the problem. But like, what do you think like after that problem, like whether the solution, like whether you can actually offer a solution is another thing, right? I mean, whether you, before you talk to them, you need to know, right? Like how much accurate it is, like whether you can actually, how much like the technology has grown. Maybe you don't know that much, like, only this can happen.
No, I think you just need to believe you can crack it. The moment you ask yourself that question, you want. See, the whole thing of an entrepreneur is to say that if there is a problem, I'll find a way to hack it, right? That's just, you should not even give yourself the option to say, will there be a solution to the problem? There will always be a solution to the problem. You just need to say, I will find it. That's the mindset we work with. We've never come across a situation where we walked away because we didn't find a way to solve it. The technology exists. People are brilliant. You can see around the room. There is enough. But you need to keep in mind that you're not going to solve it by just using technology. You need to use a certain amount of creativity, right? I mean, you need to think of solving the problem in a different way. That's a skill by itself that you need to learn. How do you pick a problem and skin a cat in different ways till you find one that works? But I've never come across a situation where, and I think Sean was referring to it, right? This is not the old ages. This is like the amount of technological finesse we now have today. And if you look at things like Amazon and Azure and the amount of AI modules they offer already. If you look at the communities that are out there, that's the other hack for you, right? There are a lot of AI communities. So if you're finding a specific problem, if you go to these communities and post a question, there'll be, hundreds of people who'll be posting answers back to you, right? So everybody is working on this in a different application. They're very, very sharing. So the AI community is extremely generous in sharing their knowledge. As a matter of fact, I know a couple of companies in Singapore who have been blackmarked because they don't share their knowledge and they try to protect it. The AI community doesn't like that very much. So it's a very, very open sharing community. You won't have a problem there.
Yeah, I think to agree with what Santosh already said, there's always a solution to a problem. And at what time is the optimum solution found, right? You could have a problem, but your solution today is the best you can offer to the market. Then maybe 10 years later, there will be even a better solution, right? Yeah, so you do not know, okay, but I think the most importantly is to keep iterating your solutions and try to solve the problem. Don't be too fixated about that one cool idea you just had, be ready to pivot yourself fast. And I think that's really the way to survive as a startup. Yeah, don't
Right.
stay very nimble, stay very, very nimble. Yeah.
Cool. Great. Thanks a lot again. So maybe just a small detour from that question which Sajna asked. It's really good to see the points of view from the industry, from Sean, from Santosh. But may I ask Shafiq a question in a completely different way? How do you keep yourself updated with the technology in the market from a student's point of view? Is it courses? Is it reading papers? How far do you go to keep yourself updated?
So I mean, I'm quite fortunate in that sense that I'm kind of involved with Salesforce in that sense. As I mentioned, that being situated in Palo Alto, kind of and sharing knowledge over Slack does a lot of things. so that is quite important. I mean, that is on source of knowledge that I get. And whenever a new paper or new technique comes, people get excited about that and they share it. Yeah, this probably has a lot of promise if we follow this on. So for example, I mean, just to give an example, recently there was this kind of this method where you can sort of use the same language model across different tasks. So you don't need to tune a separate model for every task. So you have, this idea is called prompt engineering. So you basically come up with an additional input that you attach to every model. I mean, an additional input that you just attach when you are targeting any task, but the model remains the same. So essentially you are sharing the whole model from input to the output, and you are not tuning the model for each task. So that kind of method, and it came in Slack, in Salesforce, that, yeah, this seems to be very promising. And eventually 3 papers got best paper award at NACAL, which are doing that, so this is one of the source that I have, fortunately, as I said, that we have input from quite experienced scientists and engineers who can sort of predict that how the field would go, maybe in 2 years or 5 years from now. So based on that, I kind of tailor my my research directions. That, yeah, these are the things that probably would pick up in the near future. Did that answer your question, or?
Yes, I think so. So from the student's point of view, I think that's a good perspective. But when you go, so maybe I can ask Sean. So when you go and really work in a company, so you're right now in NCS with Intel, how does your team keep updated with this? What can the students who are joining do to keep updated with cutting edge research?
Well, the good thing about working in NCS and Singtel is that being one of the biggest SI in Singapore and probably in the region, we get a lot of vendors coming to us to show them the latest technology that they can offer. Yeah, and I think that is the benefit that we get to enjoy as a large corporate. We see different solutions from around the world, and we get to choose to pick which one. But just now the questions about the Sana, right? You're sharing about, right? Actually, I also want to add one more dimension to answer, is that solution doesn't have to always be technical. Solution can be a business model. Yeah, So when you mix these two together to solve the problem, there's a lot of dynamic that will change. Yeah, for example, right, a perpetual software license like Microsoft, now they are all in cloud, right? Software as a service. Okay, the dynamic change will actually change the whole thing, even though the technology, I mean the functionality is still the same. Yeah, so when you look at the problem, you can't just look at it from a technical point of view. You have to look at it from a business model point of view as well. Yeah.
So again, just to give another example to that, I think the companies are probably a bit well ahead than as an individual we are probably in academia. I mean, this is my view after working in company like 3 years now. So for example, I think at Salesforce, we are now thinking where we should invest in after 5 years, I mean, for the next 5 years. And we are doing at least a series of brainstorming sessions, like what are the techniques we should now really adopt or we should try to learn. So these are the things perhaps, I mean, keep them a bit edge over others. I mean, at least in my field, that is how it is, that the companies are probably a bit ahead than academia.
Right, makes sense. Santosh, what's your view on that? How does a company like Graphene keep updated on how can the students do it as a startup?
So to what Shafiq said, there are a lot of conferences, right? And then you also need to know, so one of them is keep attending some of these conferences. Every year there are a set of conferences where some of the lead thinkers come and present. You should be there. The other is you have to keep in touch with academia, because if you look at the amount of work that's happening, for example, in US, Israel, even Singapore, you have to keep in touch with academia, right? And that's the second way that you will always find that you will be able to keep in touch with the latest that's happening. The third is what we do, which is everybody in AI is trying to solve problems and they don't have the full picture. So so what happens is, I'll give you an example, right? We are working on papers that were published in April 2021. We were actually trying to implement that. So when you're taking something that was, so you, as you know, everybody keeps in touch with these papers. Most AIML people keep in touch with these papers. When you're trying to implement something that is as recent as 2021, you're not solving it. You have a problem, right? And then there are a lot of other people who are also trying to solve it, and they've solved part of it. So what happens is you get together and finally you all figured out how to, what's working, what's not working, how do you solve it. So those are the three things that we use kind of to stay ahead.
Right, makes sense. So maybe a very controversial question. Sorry,
I'll just read out one thing that I posted a message on my team's channel to my team, to my N2 NLP team. I'll just read it out. So to me, these are the things that may turn out to be crucial in a couple of years from now. 1, reinforcement learning as a mean of neurosymbolic reasoning. 2, causality to counter from training test differences. And 3 is latent variable models like VQ, VAE to model, let's say, explainability. So these are the things that I'm planning, just to give an example, like this was thing, how I kind of approach this. Yeah. So this is a message that I sent yesterday to my group as a random thought.
Great. So that keeps in grounded in terms of the ideas that are already there and then to build upon. So the very controversial question here is to ask. Actually, it's so controversial that the poster said anonymous, didn't want their name disclosed. I'll go with the question anyway. They said, is it a good idea to drop off from university if you find your startup idea is boosting, or do you stick to the university and finish it? And you cannot, maybe balancing is hard. Would you drop out?
I'll probably drop off if I start making money.
I would say don't, because it's a game of risk. Okay. I know that there are a couple of famous dropouts who made it big, right? What you don't see is the thousands who didn't make it big. It's the same story as Hollywood, right? You've seen a few superstars, but you should see the number of people who go to Hollywood and spend years working as waiters, waitresses, shoe shine people, hoping to make it, and sometimes they never make it. They spend all of their life like that. So it's all a question of the odds, right? And what you can't get away from is only 1 in 10 startups survive for 2 years, not even succeed. So, I mean, just playing the game of odds, I would guide that you finish your degree. The other reason I ask you to do it is I've actually dealt with a situation like this myself. Excuse me. So when I was in P&G, as you know, my first thing was a startup, right? So there was a kid who was working there, and he did really well. And he was an undergrad, and then he came and told me he's dropping out, right? He's actually made it today. He's actually well funded. His company is worth $100 million. But the news about him in the market is that he's a terrible manager. Because your courses teach you certain things, and if you're there, you'll learn a few things that I wish he had learned, right? It's not only about are you going to be successful, it's also going to be about what legacy you leave behind. And I believe that a certain amount of education, I mean, you all know this. I know Steve Jobs was brilliant, but you know that he was a terrible manager, right? I mean, he was supposed to be a nasty man. So what you need to ask yourself is, what's it about? You know, we're all not going to be Steve Jobs, but we're all likely to have, you know, reasonably successful startups. But you also need to think about how much grounding does your education give you, and they always teach you things which I think improve your odds of being a very positive entrepreneur, and that's my belief.
Great, thanks a lot. You really spoke from your heart, all of you, so Sean, Shafiq, and Santosh. I think we have already gone past the time limit that was stipulated. Sorry for that to the panelists as well as to the audience, but it had been a really engaging session. Thank you so much. So maybe just before we finish, a couple of minutes for us to take. Any finishing thoughts? Sean, some suggestion, a word or two that you would give to our budding entrepreneurs who are planning for startups?
Yeah, I guess you just, if you have a good idea, I would say try it out, talk to people more, and learn from the past entrepreneurs who has whether they succeed or not, just listen to them and learn from their mistake also, and learn from their success as well. Yeah, probably you'll learn more from the mistake more than the success. Yeah, and I strongly recommend that university is the best time you can actually try things out. And I don't believe that you cannot do your degree and run a startup at the same time. But if your startup is proven to work, like you became the next Facebook, having schools signing up for you, people going, that huge volumes coming to you, right? I would see no reason why you want to continue, because eventually, what does the university set you up for to be is to give you the skills and also give you the stepping stone to the next step, right? So if you are able to do it successfully in the uni, then you got your stepping stone to the next step. So you should optimize your time, and you guys are engineer. You need to learn how to optimize within constraint and succeed. Yeah, and I think NT will be very happy if you drop out and start a new big company that's very successful.
All right, thanks,
Yeah.
Sean. Shafiq, any quick thoughts for students who are planning for startups?
Yeah, I mean, I always give the same thing. I mean, even though if you're not going for startup, it's like learn machine learning, learn deep learning, learn reinforcement learning, learn PyTorch. These are the sources you need to be successful in AI now. So that is the summary of that. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, Santosh, any last words for the students?
Sure. I'm going to actually tell you a story of what happened when, this was around 7.5 years ago when I started. And then one of my mentors was the CEO of National Instruments Worldwide. And he said, Santosh, I really envy you because you are doing something where you're going off and setting an example for your kids where they're seeing you go into the startup world. And he said, look, in the next generation, the brightest people will all be in the startups. And I'm just afraid my kids are going to look at me and end up in another big corporation where all the duds are. And those are his words, not mine, right? And I can tell you now that that is beginning to happen. So don't treat this session so much as, hey, do you want to go and do a startup by yourself? I think the time has already arrived where the best jobs and the smartest people are all in startups. The ecosystem has settled down. The risk reward ratio has become manageable versus what it used to be, and there is no disadvantage there. So what I would urge all of you to consider is, because while I see the rest of Asia, markets like Indonesia and India, where the startup ecosystem has just taken off, China, it's still lacking in Singapore because bright talent like you have not woken up and realized that versus all your MNCs, a startup is probably where the brightest minds in your generation are going to land up eventually. The question you need to ask yourself is, do you want to do a jump start and be there now, or then follow the crowd when you realize that the smartest have gone there later? So just think about that, okay? Whether you don't need to be the owner of a startup, right? You just need to be there because the brightest minds are all there now.
Great. That's a immense amount of motivation from all our panelists. Thanks a lot to all three of you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Shafiq. Thanks, Santosh, for being with us, sharing with the students so much from your wealth of experience, working in different areas, and still we could agree and maybe agree to disagree on some of the topics. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for being with us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone in the audience. It has been a pleasure moderating this session, talking to the panel. And I would hand it over to Harris. Harris, any
Sorry, one second word, Sourav, if you don't mind. So for those of you, we posted on the thing, we are actively hiring and happy to mentor in any way. We also do a bit of investment now. So please do reach out if you want an internship, if you want to work with us. I think the details have been posted. But even if you want to continue chats, more than happy to mentor any of you anytime.
Thanks a lot, Santosh. Yes, the opportunity has probably been posted. Yeah, it's in the Zoom chat as well.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Harris, anything else for the audience before we break?
Thank you, Dr. Shafiq, Mr. Santosh, and Mr. Sean for an insightful discussion on the topic, getting started with an AI startup. So, and also thank you to Dr. Sourav for moderating the session. I think it was really insightful, and I personally wish that the session would continue on, but yeah, we have an closing ceremony at 6 o'clock that we need to attend. And so we just like to invite all our panelists, moderator, and audience to the closing ceremony at 6 o'clock. Yeah, and also, yes, there's also job opportunities that you can see in the Hoover platform under the community forum. I think Mr. Sean also has posted some job opportunities there. You can take a look. Yeah. And yeah, so we will just be ending the session now. And yeah, thank you so much to our panelists and moderators and audience for attending today. All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.